All right. I have never given a lecture like this before because it's mostly about morality. So the question is, what kinds of governance are moral? And then maybe later we'll get into what kinds of governance are a good idea. But first of all, do you all know this story? Everybody knows this story. Who doesn't know what this is about? Great. Okay. My pleasure. So this little guy up here has the option of pushing that fat guy off the bridge. And if he does, the fat guy will die. But his death will stop that trolley from running over these people who are tied up.
It's a big thing in philosophy.
Yeah, this is a big thing in philosophy because people have differing intuitions. To some people, it's totally obvious that he should push the fat guy over right away. To other people, it's totally obvious you should never do that. Especially if, what if the fat guy is pitiful? What if he's begging? Please don't push me. And the words for the different ways of thinking about this are consequentialism versus deontology. Consequentialism means what's moral is what is going to be the outcome of your choice. And deontology means what's moral is the choice itself. There's another version of the same thing where instead of pushing the fat guy, you're just throwing a switch. And I really think it's interesting how different these two versions are, because to a consequentialist, these two are the same thing as each other, the same outcomes. I'm not sure to a deontologist, because I'm mostly a consequentialist myself, but not all the way. So, what's that? So, the worst way to advocate for consequentialism is to say the ends justify the means. And the worst way to advocate for deontology is to say, this here road, we're paving it with good intentions, and boy, is it going to take us to a good place. And yeah, I've never given a lecture like this before, but I have a couple of thoughts about this. But my main thought about this is I don't know the right answer, but one of my main thoughts is let's not be in this situation. Let's not live in this world. Let's organize our society so that we very rarely have to make decisions that involve sudden murder and really bad consequences. But then yeah, what do you want to say?
I just wanted to say that in smart cars, this is one of the reasons they are not on the road. Because in smart car, you have to put it in the algorithm to choose who's going to drive.
Yeah.
And usually the fat guy is yourself as the driver.
Yeah. He says in smart cars, this is one of the things holding back the deployment of smart cars is you have to implement one of these two rules into your code. And he says, what's your name? Shmoy? He says the fat guy is usually the driver of the car in those algorithms. Yeah, it's a good point. So my first thought is let's arrange our society so that this rarely happens. And I'm really serious about that. It's funny. But actually, a lot of law and order and national defense and public policy is about avoiding putting people in these situations, which is good because I don't want to be in this situation. And my next thought is we actually do live in a world where this rarely happens, right or wrong? So there's rarely some decision you need to make where a near-term and certain outcome is some kind of major consequence to other people. But in terms of firing people? Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah. Bailouts, public policy, all kinds of public policy. So, this is why I'm not in public policy, because I don't want to live in that kind of world. Except now I've invented a cryptocurrency. But I was going to say one last thing, which really, so I'm basically just instinctively a consequentialist. I just naturally think, well, duh, this is the situation. Well, duh, obviously the right thing to do is to kill the fewest people. But the argument that bothers me the most, the argument that bothers me the most is I don't really know the outcomes. right? The train tracks are very fuzzy and uncertain and complicated, and people who are smarter than me and have looked at the train tracks longer than me argue that one thing is going to kill more people. And then someone else who's also smarter than me, who's also looked at the train tracks longer than me, argues that the other thing is going to kill more people. So that's the worst thing about consequentialism, is that you actually don't know the consequences. That makes it pretty hard. Now, this might be totally unfair, but I really feel like there's something to it. Too bad Vitalik's gone, and I feel like the DAO hard fork was a consequentialist decision, right? You know what I mean? Does everybody know about the DAO hard fork? Yeah. Good. Everybody knows about the DAO hard fork, but not the trolley problem. And I feel like this might be totally unfair. I love Bitcoiners, and I love Ethereals. But even though I love Bitcoiners, I think they're a little bit moralistic or rule-oriented in their arguments, at least one faction of Bitcoiners, in their arguments about governance. They say certain kinds of hard forks are just wrong. That's just immoral. And that's just a rule. And so if you have a consequentialist arguing with a deontologist, it's a big waste of oxygen, right? Because one can explain better and better why the rule should be like this way, and the other can explain better and better why the consequences would be like that way, but this isn't accomplishing anything. Okay, so my conclusion is I'd like a little of each, please, and some in the middle, and mix it all up. So for better or for worse, this means you're not going to necessarily be able to predict what I think I should do if there's like a DAO hack in Zcash. Well, hopefully there won't be. So my goal is to avoid DAO hack situations so I don't have to think about trolley problems. Okay, next topic. In the arguments about hard forks and governance and the sort of social contract of a blockchain. So there's the devs who make new versions of the software, and there's the users who use the software. And I'm going to argue that there's a forgotten third party in this picture.
The miners?
I'm not going to tell you yet. The question was miners. There is an argument, which is, to me, a sort of moralistic sounding argument. I'm not sure what I mean by moralistic, but I guess appealing to morals. That you shouldn't, it would be morally wrong to change the rules, if you're a dev, to make a new version of the software that implements different rules than the previous version of the software did. And that would be morally wrong because it's kind of like theft. Because someone's using the previous version of your cryptocurrency software and they're relying on it to do money for them in some way. And if you change the rules, that's stealing from them. For example, so in Zcash currently, there's this software with these consensus rules in it, which causes there to be a maximum of 21 million Zcash ever, which we copied from Bitcoin. We could make a new version of the software that made there be 22 million Zcash and donated 1 million to trolley victims charity or something. Well, let me be more serious. We could make a new version of the software that makes the maximum be 22 instead of 21. In fact, it could just generate an extra million right there, like the very first time it runs. And it could donate that million to hurricane victims who are literally suffering from disease and homelessness. We could do that. We could make the software, that is. But I don't know if we could get any money donated to hurricane victims that way because we're just the devs over on the left. So here's my metaphor. There's a western town in Colorado 150 years ago or whatever, and somebody comes into the general store and they have some kind of money and they say, I want to buy this bag of grain and here's my money. And the shopkeeper says, I don't take that kind of money. That's the wrong kind of money for me. Well, is the shopkeeper stealing from the customer? Is that moral for the shopkeeper to say that? So my answer, and now I've switched. Now I'm a deontologist. Now I just think morality is a very simple amount of rules, and the simple rule is you don't threaten other people with violence. You don't force them what to do. The shopkeeper's not threatening the other guy. He's just saying, I'm not giving you my grain. I don't take that piece of paper. So he's doing a perfectly moral thing. And so in cryptocurrencies, if all the shopkeepers in the world say, we only take the version of Zcash that donates 1 million Zcash to hurricane victims, those shopkeepers are perfectly within their morality, in my opinion. They're not coercing or threatening or performing violence on anyone. Or they could say, we only take the version that doesn't donate. We reject the version that does donate. And that would also be within their rights. So from that perspective, my conclusion is that hard forks are moral and also inevitable because the people are going to disagree about what's right. People always just, you're not going to get everyone to agree. So one thing we did with Zcash to try to be more moral was to warn people ahead of time. So this was 21 days before Zcash launched, and we wrote a blog post arguing for this position, arguing that we have no obligation as the devs to do or not do anything as far as moral requirements, because the moral obligation is on the users and the other users to decide what they want to accept. And that's good. This is a really great thing. This is why I work in cryptocurrency and not in, I don't know, banking or government or something, is because I feel like either decision I'm making, I'm not performing violence on anyone. Because this is not a trolley problem, at least not yet. So.
Could you clarify this? In fact, what you're saying is, I may change the rule, and it's your business whether you accept this change.
Yeah, that's what we said. We said, this is all a consensual endeavor. It's all opt-in. We're going to post this software. If you want, you can run it, but you don't have to. And then, a month later, we're going to post some new software. And the same game. You can run the new software, or you can run the old software, or you can run somebody else's software, but this is all your choice. Yeah, he says that's what ICO is saying, we don't commit to anything. I want to leave that alone because it gets into the other kind of immorality, which is tricking people. So I want to just avoid the immorality which is threatening people. Okay, so here's a neat fact about the history of forks so far. If you have a fork, it might or might not result a network upgrade. They're called hard forks. The word hard fork is now ambivalent, whatever, I'm ambivalent. The word hard fork is conflated. Some people use hard fork to mean it split the blockchain into two permanent things, and other people use hard fork to mean we did a backwards incompatible upgrade. So Ethereum and also, I think Bitcoin might or might not have done a hard fork. Oh, and some people use hard fork to mean a third thing is more technical. So anyway, the point is there are 4 possible scenarios with forking. You can do a backwards incompatible upgrade, but everyone can agree to go along with it. And this has happened many times in a large-scale blockchain. And you can disagree and split the blockchain into 2. Or you can disagree and stay on the same blockchain, and this is what Bitcoin is currently doing, and I wish they would stop, because it's like when 2 of your friends, their marriage is failing, and they hate each other more and more, and I just want them to move out so I can stop hearing from each other about how much they don't like the other one. Split. Yeah, and there's this thing, Bitcoin Cash, which in the marriage analogy, it just doesn't work with the marriage analogy, so forget it. Okay, so these are possibilities. Oh, and this is another thing we said. This is from another blog post that we posted right around the launch of Zcash, which is if we get to the point in the future that Zcash users want more than one trade-off, let's do both. Let's have both, because one technology isn't going to be the best suited technology for every use. Some people might have one use, some people might have another use, and some people might have both uses, and they might want to use both versions of the technology. So let's try this. Let's have the kind of fork that branches a blockchain into 2 branches, but doesn't result in an unhappy married couple.
This happens often in like religion and society.
Ellie says this happens often in religion society, but it's usually not very friendly, right?
No, it usually starts off at least, or sometimes there's schisms, but often it's like, there's this version, that version,
You can part ways in a friendly way.
Like
Good.
Jewish religious community, there are different flavors. Sometimes they fight in the end.
Yeah.
Is that Bitcoin Cash or no?
I don't know. I wrote this before Bitcoin Cash happened. Bitcoin Cash ruins my metaphor. Who was it who said Bitcoin Cash over there? Let's see, it's been 15 minutes. Here's some more unfair oversimplifications. Bitcoin has no leader. I guess that's pretty fair. And it's structureless. And this is actually a bad word in certain circles, like leftist intellectuals from America. If you say, oh, this is great, we have structureless organization, they know that you're actually damning it, right? Because of this famous essay called The Tyranny of Structurelessness about second wave feminism in about 1970 something, which said very persuasively that having no organization and no rules and no leader is a great way to oppress people and control them and give the privileged few all of the power in your group.
Just think that's what happened in Bitcoin.
I think there's a lot of things going on in Bitcoin, but I think this is one of them. Yeah. Yeah, you should read the essay. It's really long and boring and about second wave feminism from 40 years ago, but it's really great and true. The tyranny of structurelessness. And the bottom line is saying there are no rules and there's no organization is actually a lie. It just means we're not telling you the rules. It means the rules are determined by who's the most reputable and socially powerful person in the group. Although, there's a way that Bitcoin is different from this, is the deontological rule that there's no changing the protocol. You can't have backwards incompatible changes. That's an interesting one because so there is a position you can take, which is regardless of everything else, regardless of consequences and social organization and the demands of users and other users, regardless of everything, the rule is just no changing the protocol. And I like that because it's simple and unambiguous, but I really don't believe, that's the problem with deontology, and also the problem with consequentialism is that you can't really hold it consistently. Nobody's really going to keep running the same version of Bitcoin forever. They're going to eventually want to improve it or stop using it and start using something else. So I wish Vitalik were here so I could find out if he accepts this unfair oversimplification that he's a benevolent dictator of Ethereum. They also have a great community in Ethereum. I really love the Ethereum community. But I only wanted to put 2 things in the circle. And also the Ethereum community is more enthusiastic about building on top, I think. The Bitcoin community is more enthusiastic about using and belonging to the lower layer. The Ethereum community is enthusiastic about that too. This is pretty aspirational. What we'd like to do is I'd like a certain degree of structurelessness, but not the bad kind, and I'd like a really enthusiastic community, and I'd like to get a benevolent dictator who's smarter than me, and commercial ecosystem. And we have little bits of these things already in Zcash. One thing that we definitely do have already in Zcash is there's 2 instead of 1 center of power. I really don't know what to think about this structuralist thing. We're going to have a big, interesting test of this on November 1st, when one faction of Bitcoin says that they're going to change the rules and cause a hard fork. And the other faction says, oh, no, you're not. Yeah. What was I saying? Oh, so currently we have two centers of power in Zcash, which I'm pretty satisfied with because it's way more than one. So one is me, because I'm the CEO of the company, and the company employs almost all the coders. And because I get to put my face in interviews and stuff frequently. And the other one is the Zcash Foundation. And the important thing to know is that the Zcash Foundation is independent for me. They can do whatever they want. I can't stop them, and they can't stop me. So we just have to either cooperate, or maybe we can each have a different fork in the future, or whatever. Oh yeah, I didn't get to this part yet. Right, so far Bitcoin has had 0 or 1 hard forks, or 2, depending on how you define hard forks, but no chain splits. Ethereum has had 1 chain split and many backwards incompatible upgrades. And what we've done, oh, there's another blog post, I didn't have a screenshot of it here, but what we've done is the software that we're putting out nowadays shuts itself down after, I think, 4 months. So we're trying to put out a new version every month. That's probably going to slip back to like every 2 months because it's hard to write software. So we're putting out a new version pretty frequently. And each version of the Zcash software that my company makes, it looks at the blockchain to see what time it is. And if it's more than 4 months since it was born, it emits a message saying, I am too old to be trusted to deal with this newfangled blockchain. So you got to upgrade me. And then it shuts down. It refuses to operate. So that seems like a pretty simple thing, but it has really weird, interesting, positive, I hope, consequences, which is that it changes the default. So the default, if your software is willing to keep trying, no matter how old it is that you'll keep running it. And then if somebody says everybody needs to upgrade to new software, this is an opt-in problem. Right? We've got to get as many people as possible to opt into upgrading from the old working thing to a new thing on a certain schedule or some kind of coordination point. And now this is the opposite way around. Anybody who just does nothing is just going to stop receiving transactions and just disconnect.
Now you have a chance to introduce a bug once a month.
We have a chance to introduce a bug once a month. Well, there's 2 ways to introduce bugs. We put out new software all the time, and all the new software has a chance to introduce a catastrophic bug. Yeah, this is what I don't like.
Isn't this kind of the equivalent of making like money that expires every 4 months and you have to go back to the bank and refresh it?
That's an interesting question. Wait, before I try to respond to these 2 questions, the question was, isn't this the equivalent of making money that expires every 4 months? You have to go back to the bank and refresh it. I don't think so, but let me think about it in a second. But let me finish saying, this is now default opt-in, I guess. So what we intend to do, we haven't done this yet, but we're going to do it soon. We call it hard fork 0. And hard fork 0 is very uncontroversial because I don't know what it'll do, but it'll probably just improve, like fix a couple of bugs and improve some error messages and improve some performance like we've done every month or 2 for the last 10 months. So it's going to be a very uncontroversial thing. We're not going to donate 1 million Zcash to anyone or anything in hard fork 0. But we're going to put out a version of the software that does something new that's backwards incompatible and that sufficiently old versions of the software would be unable to handle. And then we're going to wait 4 months. And then we're going to say, any old version has by now shut itself down. Every node currently connected to Zcash I know is at least of this version. So it's automatically going to notice once the blockchain is sufficiently high that it knows that's been 4 months, then it's just going to flip the switch. So that's the way that we intend to do backwards incompatible hard forking upgrades without chain splits. Itay.
How would you compare this to Ethereum's policy for their ice age?
I don't remember how theirs works.
They increase the difficulty to a way that the chain stops unless you hard fork.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah, that's crazy. Those guys do so many complicated, mind-boggling, insane things, and then it keeps working. They hired us, Ethereum Foundation hired my company before the first launch of Ethereum to do security auditing of some of their pieces. And all along, like even before that, I've always said, this thing is way too ambitious and way too complicated and involves like 3 or 4 new ideas that have never been tried before, so it's never gonna work. And it keeps working, but. Anyway, so one of these crazy, hilarious ideas is the so-called difficulty bomb, which, anyway, I don't even know how to compare it to this idea. This idea is simpler, I can remember it. What's that?
Can you give some details to the clueless?
About the difficulty bomb? No, it's too complicated. Can you explain it today? It says the consensus, I'll try. The consensus rules say that the difficulty level, so the point is, the point of it was they said that they wanted to switch from proof of work to proof of stake, like a year ago or whatever. Remember this whole idea? And then they said, we don't want, by the time comes and we've done all this research and development to get the proof of stake software ready, we don't want the miners to have become so contented with proof of work that they object and prevent the deployment of proof of stake. So we're going to put into the consensus rules today, which is like a year ago, that at a certain point in the future, the mining difficulty will start ramping up to infeasible levels. Okay, so they put in this bomb early so that everyone would already be on that consensus rule set, so that, I guess similarly to our idea, the default now is if no one does anything, then proof of work is going to stop working. Of course, then what happened was everything takes longer than you think, right? So then what happened was the deadline started approaching and they weren't nearly done with the research and development necessary to deploy proof of stake. So then they had to change the consensus rules in order to delay the difficulty bomb, right? Isn't that what happened?
Something like that.
Or will happen?
They force themselves too hard.
We need an expert here. How much time do I have? How much?
15 minutes.
Wow, great. We have forever to chat. Oh, no, wait. I forget your question. Your question was, isn't this like your money expiring going back to the bank? It's an interesting question. I think that really harkens back to this. Money expiring. Like, I feel, frankly, in all sincerity, I think I'm likely to get blamed for stuff that I don't think is my fault, which is if maybe we're both at fault, or we both should take credit, but if somebody says, I don't want to use normal old 21 million Zcash, I want to use the version of Zcash that has 1% inflation every year for the rest of history. And I say, oh, okay, I'll code that up, 1.01 times. Yeah. Well, to me, that was their idea. It was their moral choice. Like writing software is not forcing anyone to do anything. But, you know, I skipped over this in the first version of when I was talking a minute ago because I didn't realize, having never done anything like this before, that it only takes 25 minutes to go through that. I skipped over the really bad part about my position is that consent, so consent is my touchstone. Consent is what matters to me, but consent versus non-consent or coercion or violence is not black and white. It's a continuum. And that means that morality to me is not black and white, which is a very uncomfortable position for me to have. But if, if all the shopkeepers in town say we only take a certain kind of money, if it's really everyone in town, then that really is starting to impinge on the person's, the customer's life, right? You can imagine situations, many of which have probably happened in real life, where all the shopkeepers say, we don't serve black people, or we don't serve them at the same prices, or something like that. And that's, you could just argue deontologically, well, hey, shopkeepers can do whatever they want. They didn't threaten anyone. But the more important, the more necessary that transaction is for the users, the less you can say that the non-coercive, voluntary, consensual choices of the participants are perfectly moral, right? So currently, nobody relies on Zcash for their living, well, except for me. Nobody gets paid in Zcash except for a few of my employees. Nobody has to spend Zcash in a shop in order to get necessary supplies, or in order to get their children medical care or get education or anything that's really important to them. So for now, it's easy for me to say, yeah, whatever anybody wants, they can just all opt in. It's all opt in. But in the future, if everyone in your community is using Zcash at the same time, now we've reversed the opt-in versus opt-out. And then I will have to think a lot more carefully about what sorts of rules I would support, either verbally or with source code or whatever. I don't remember how I got onto that topic. Yes? The company? Oh, that's a really good question. The question is, if the Zcash company disappears or fails or absconds to South America, what happens to her money? That's a really fundamental question, which I just totally skipped over in here. And the answer is, I don't have a slide that shows this. The answer is that Zcash is a decentralized open source thing. So there's kind of a layer of Zcash which is exactly like Bitcoin. There's a like, so one answer is, if the Zcash company and me and all the employees disappear. Say that again. Oh, that's a good question. Okay, let me finish this.
As Mitch said it turns out that my money expired.
Okay.
Unless I can hire some software.
Yeah, you all three have a good question, but let me say a more basic thing in case anyone else is confused by an even more basic thing. The even more basic thing is all right, my claim is if the company disappears, then what's left is just like Bitcoin. And then more precisely, the thing about the software shutting itself down, that's also consensual. You also have control over it. You just have to, you either have to be a programmer or you have to find a programmer and ask them to open it up and fix that part.
My mother wouldn't like that.
But your mother can find a programmer. Like, Bitcoin, you have to.
That's a programmer. She would still not like that.
She would ask you to fix it and make it turn back on again. I mean, is this not a satisfying answer? To me, all I've done is change the default.
I mean,
Okay. It's not a satisfying. It's not a satisfying. Not satisfying. Okay, there's two different things. There's the automatically turn yourself off, and there's support, right? Support in software, like if you're relying on some software for your money, what if it turns out that there's a bug in it which can cause your money to be destroyed or stolen? What do you do? What does your mom do? Does she call you and ask you to fix the bug? What do you do? I think what most people do is they depend on someone who has some kind of responsibility to fix such bugs, right?
So basically my take on that is quite different. I mean, my take on that is that what protects my money is that I'm a small player. And if there is a bug in the system, say the Israeli monetary system, in the dollar, in the bank where my money sits, there are so many other people in the same problem that they will break the rules if necessary and set it so we don't lose.
Oh, your solution is you.
The same interest as you have, as big players' interest on the same.
No, that's
Big players have a different interest, but there are lots of small players.
Yeah. Okay,
So
but
as happened with the DAO and has happened with the bailouts, at some point someone intervened and said, we break the rules, we do the exact opposite of whatever it is we promised we'll do, but we are going to save the economy.
yeah.
What level?
But this is a different topic. This is a perfectly valid strategy, which is entrust your money to some third party and then require them to take care of you.
It's not entrusting my money to a third party, it's being in the same boat with a lot of other people. And that is, in some sense, the real protection in a society. Like the thing that protects me in society from having my house robbed is that I'm in the same situation as everybody else.
Well, I'm confused because I don't think of myself as a custodian or caretaker of anyone's money. I think of myself as a software engineer. And to me, software maintenance and updates and support contracts are what my experience. So.
But if the company disappears, you'll be in the same boat with all the other users, and one of them is going to say, "Oh, here's the line that you should comment out," or whatever it is, the 3 line. And now the software doesn't, show itself.
Yes,
Maybe
that's correct.
he will change the code, as you said, and maybe he will change the code so that it also gives, I don't know, 1% to him.
Right. Maybe the Fed bails out to help the little guys, or maybe the Fed helps the big bankers. Right.
I don't really understand. I feel like there's a disconnect here. To me, what I have done is not causing any of the problems that you're alluding to, even though I think those problems exist. To me, those problems exist just as well in Bitcoin and everywhere.
In a morally good position is that I have the complete choice of not using Zcash.
Right.
You set up some game with
But
some rules.
I feel like there's a.
If I don't like the game rules, then I can.
Yeah, but I feel like there's a misunderstanding about what the rules are.
At this stage,
I think these are the same rules as Bitcoin. I claim that Zcash has the same consequences as Bitcoin has with regard to the safety of your money, with regard to what your options are in the future. So my claim is that the automatic self-shutdown policy changes the default behavior if you do nothing, but it doesn't take away any of your options or give you any new options. So it's the same as Bitcoin. Which maybe you don't want Bitcoin, but that's fine too. Maybe this is why Satoshi disappeared. Yeah. It's a good question. I sure hope I meet Satoshi someday. I'm going to ask him. Yeah. I sure hope I meet Satoshi and he finally admits it, and then I'm going to ask him. Okay, hey, we could. Do you have any more questions or? Yeah.
In my opinion, it's a kind of forcing function, like in psychology.
Uh-huh.
So, for example, if you want to lose weight, you don't have a fridge at home.
Uh-huh.
But they cancel, they defy the whole concept of forcing function by canceling it.
Yeah. There's this great cartoon from Frog and Toad where they're eating too many cookies, and so they say, we can put the cookies in the box and close the lid and put a rope around the box. And then they say, but we could untie the rope, and we could open the box. But I guess that's the difference. Itay asked earlier, what's the difference between our auto self-shutdown feature and the difficulty bomb? I guess technically the difference is the auto self-shutdown feature is a local action of a single node, which doesn't really consult with anyone else, whereas the difficulty bomb is a consensus rule, which requires coordinated upgrade from everyone to change it. Yeah. Hey.
You said that it's okay to diverge to a lot of hard forks, even some small cults, but maybe it is okay in an abstract idea, but technically, if we have a lot of small blockchains, they will be very weak in the consensus protocol. It will be very easy to just do double spending from some small blockchain.
That's just a matter of how much people want any one of those things. It didn't happen with the ETC-ETH split. People predicted that kind of thing before the ETC-ETH split, and I predicted the opposite, and I was right.
I want to ask something, but I'll leave others. I mean, like the economic value thing is what, but I don't get it. I mean, I don't get it with all these forks. I mean, because suppose if I bought Ethereum or I buy Zcash, I say, okay, I expect there's going to be only one blockchain, and then boom, it like splits into two. But I mean, I can't get my mind around these things. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like someday, you know, Federal Bank says, oh, you know what, starting tomorrow, everyone gets to photocopy whatever their check is. And now we're all fine, and, you know, just go out.
Yeah. Yeah, so Bitcoin itself, I don't know about you, but the whole idea that people could value Bitcoins on one blockchain was counterintuitive and unbelievable for a lot of people for a long time, right? Maybe, I think there's a lot of people still who think it's impossible for Bitcoin to actually have value, right? And similarly, there's some other people like who think, oh, obviously Bitcoins could have value, but chain-splitted things couldn't both have value. That would obviously be impossible.
Yeah, and then empirically, all these things happen. And
Yeah, I like to be empirical about it. I believe it has value until it doesn't. And then I'll say, oh, you're right, it doesn't have value.
Can you comment or suggest some mechanism for future-friendly forks?
Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to learn a little bit about this on November 1, unless one side backs down, which I don't predict. Replay protection is a big thing. So the naive thing to do, which happened with the ETC-ETH hard fork, makes it so that whatever money you had on the first blockchain, you now have the same amounts of money on both of the two new blockchains. But very much to your surprise, if you spend one of them, this also spends the other one, which is not what you thought. And a lot of money was lost and much confusion and damage was done by that. So making sure that's not the case is a necessary condition for a smooth, easy chain split. And there's more like it.
Wait, I missed it. After I have the fork, I can spend my money
It's just,
once or in both.
yeah, it's basically just a technical consequence. Like, it's basically a bug in the protocol because the protocol did not anticipate having a chain split and having multiple chains, which is that you can do a replay attack. And so you know how in Bitcoin, sending money is signing a message saying, I hereby agree to send this money. Well, if you, after the chain split, you have two flavors of Bitcoin. If you sign a message saying, I'm going to send this purple Bitcoin to my friend, that message is also valid on the other chain with the blue Bitcoin, which is not what you thought. You thought you could just spend one of them to your friend and leave the other one untouched.
Question not if the message is valid, but does it get on the block on the other
It could and did in ETC-ETH, and a similar thing could happen for Bitcoin. Now, it's easy to fix by putting the word purple or blue inside the message. So you say, I signed this purple Bitcoin over to my friend. Now, that won't have any effect if played on the blue blockchain, and now you're safe against that. There's other things. I think actually the biggest thing is naming. It's sort of like if your friends are breaking up, they can definitely go their own ways and be happy. If there's a house, they can sell it and split the money or whatever. But if there's kids, it gets harder, right? So the problem with the Bitcoin hard fork that is probably coming in November is that both sides claim that theirs is the real thing called Bitcoin in the newspapers and the ticker symbols and everything like that. And that I don't know how to solve. But here's what we do know, here's what we do propose for Zcash is we will have unambiguous names. So if there's a Zcash split in the future into two flavors of Zcash, we'll agree in advance which one's purple and which one's blue, so that everyone knows. And in order to do that unbiasedly, we either have to give one the prestige of being Zcash, one just being the 5-letter name, and the other one has to get relegated to Zcash purple, right? Or they have to both be relegated to Zcash purple or Zcash blue. I pled and pled with my Bitcoiner friends on Twitter. I said, just agree now that neither of you, this is like Solomon's baby, okay? Just Solomon, the woman's baby that Solomon was making the decision about. It wasn't his baby, as far as the story tells. So I just pled with them, just agree now, one of you can be called like BTCX and the other one can be called BTCY, at least for a little while, just be peaceful, don't, they both, it was really funny. They accused me of being a traitor to the other side for having suggested that, right? Because they thought their side is the moral, deontological, deserving chain to be called the real BTC. And so it was immoral to suggest that they call it anything else.
Just short of getting down the block size debate, I suggest we stop now for a coffee break.
Oh, phew, that was close.
And thank you very much to Zooko again.